the system as it stands seems to reward self-indulgent sociopathic narcissists because they can just manipulate and brutalize people en masse without caring at all. And that the reward systems for that kind of personality type should not exist. Those people should be relegated to dog parks and little holes in society because they're just, they're part of the problem. They really are. And I can't speak to how they ended up that screwed up, but here we are.
Why don't you tell us what you really think?
This is Way of the Artist with Brandon Colby Cook and Evan Schulte.
Identifying your blocks and demystifying your struggles
so that you can claim your own path
and make your life a work of art.
Hello, podcast people. We have a guest today. His name is Kai Morf, and I'm going to get straight to it. So he has a Bachelor of Science in Economics. He considers himself to be a bit of a crypto investor and a bit of a microdoser as well. So an exploration of the mind, so to speak. We're going to get into all that. You might have heard some of our laws. You might have listened to some of those episodes when we created Way of the Artist. And 3 that really stood out to Kai are authenticity, appreciation, and simplicity. So we're going to get into that. We'll see how this conversation evolves. And I don't know. Take it away, Evan.
So, Kai, how have you been doing during all of the insanity going on in the world right now?
Well, as you've noticed, I kind of got either incredibly bored or something, so I went and did something foolish to my head. But it's been fun for me. Well, like all of us, I'm going through a range of emotions, and it's uncertain times. A lot of people are questioning what's going on. A lot of uncertainty. Some people are having to radically change their lifestyles because they're out of work, for example. And back to the intro, Brandon, like my Bachelor of Science in Economics, it's fascinating textbook stuff that's happening right now. We're dealing with all kinds of bizarro lands, seemingly unforeseen economic circumstances, massive unemployment, yet the stock market keeps going up, like just bizarro land stuff. So it's been very interesting as well. Mm-hmm.
What's your thoughts on that? Like, being that you studied that, what are the things that you're seeing that are kind of bizarre, or the things that maybe are predictable under these circumstances based on your education?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. 2 things come to mind. One, that the corruption of the system, specifically south of the border, America, the corruption of the system is just becoming so obscenely obvious. It's almost dumbfounding. And then I guess as a secondary note, the corruption is really indicated by the fact that they have a 30% unemployment rate in the US right now, and yet the stock market is going up. So that's inconceivable under normal circumstances. How is that even possible? And so you get into what's called the quantitative easing, i.e. the U.S. government's just making money, and then just throwing it at their billionaire hedge fund buddies so they can just keep their artificial system inflated. And it's unprecedented, and I'm quite curious to see how it'll play out.
Right. So, I mean, we've had some discussions in the past, and you had mentioned that economically speaking, like we are in a bit of a no man's land right now. Like there are things that are going on that where we actually don't know what happens when mm-hmm. these things are happening, or when things are playing out the way that they are. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, well, we'll go back to the quantitative easing question, and I'll focus on the U.S. for the time being because it is such a unique circumstance. They're just making money out of thin air, dumping it into the system, which typically causes hyperinflation, but they're not. There's a thing called velocity of money. They're not actually dumping the money into the general population. They're just consolidating it in their little 0.1% billionaire class. And so they've really expanded the money supply, which technically means that there should be a lot of money movement. in the economy, which isn't happening. So that's the unprecedented part. They've hyperinflated their currency, but there's no actual economic movement with it. They're just kind of hoarding it at the top of the food chain and kind of, I guess, sitting there in gluttonous money fest going, wow, we're so rich. And yet, the man on the street is being promised $1,200 eventually. And in the meantime, fuck you. You can starve to death. We really don't care about you. It seems to be the economic and the political model right now. And when do people get sick of this and grab pitchforks and do something about it? I'm curious.
So, I mean, like, especially absolutely, like, there's in a situation like this, we're seeing all kinds of systems failing. And areas where there are weaknesses being exposed, for sure. What is it like? We always like to try and like take a creative outlook towards all of this, and how can we be creative, find solutions to our problems going forward? How are you kind of creatively looking at everything that's going on right now? Do you have any sort of ideas of directions that could be taken instead of the actions that are being done?
Yeah, there's an intense personal element to this, because obviously all of us are being kind of put into unfamiliar territory. And so part of the creative process is challenging yourself and going into unfamiliar territory. The pandemic, in a strange way, is putting people in a very intense zone of discomfort. And I hear this again and again from a variety of friends. And in that discomfort, you either kind of germinate something new and fresh, or you kind of get broken down and seek support or mental health. A lot of people are having mental health issues and needing a lot of support through counseling or just community connection with friends. So back to the more like, how do we expand and create and do something useful with this? The world as it was broken. People forget that we had something like 100,000 people starving to death a day on planet Earth. That wasn't a system that was working for very many people. The concept of wage slavery, everybody's working 40 hours or 80 hours a week just to get by, to feed their kids, to pay their mortgage, to pay interest rates to banks. And so I guess in a roundabout way, I think we need to question the banking system and the fractional reserve system itself. We don't all need to be paying mortgages in triplicate. We don't all need to be having massive student loans just to get basic education. We have invented a financial system that is very top-down, kind of master-serf. It's a master-serf relationship. And we've gotten so used to it that the notion of questioning it seems to be almost a radical concept. And yet it's a human creation, it's a human construct. So why can't we actually do something about it? And just to allude to a very simple solution, a universal basic income. And the example of Canada here might be appropriate. We're all getting $2,000 a month from our government to help us sort of make ends meet through this time. That is a universal basic income. It's a short-term thing right now, but why can't we expand it to something permanent? Perhaps $1,000 a month, where everybody has a basic need met, and just as an example. Mm-hmm.
Right. With economics too, based on the way things are going and where money's flowing and what's happening, but there's also the perception, people have beliefs, or they think things work a certain way, and so then they participate in the economy, in the game that it is, mm-hmm. right? And I think you're right. What we are seeing, and Evan and I talked about this before. That the system before is broken, and we're seeing that, and we're seeing how it's coming out, and we're seeing how one for all for one is not really a good strategy in a time like this. We're so interconnected, and everybody is connected. But I think there is kind of a changing of beliefs, right? And where would you, people are open, right? People are kind of going, this isn't working, obviously, and they want change. They're overwhelmed. They don't know how. What would you suggest to someone to say, where could they start, putting their energy or their beliefs or their focus?
changing your sources of information is the first thing that comes to mind. Like even what we're doing right now, we're sharing different ideas. We're creating forums for new modalities of communication. And this little experiment or this little example right now with the three of us talking, I'm seeing sort of exponentiated all over the place. People are, the Zoom technology is taking off like crazy. People are intercommunicating in ways they never have before. We're sharing ideas that we've never expressed before. The environment is necessitating people seeing and trying to do things differently. So I don't have a specific example for you because everybody will find their own path in their own way. But the thing that really comes to the forefront of my mind is we need to stop trusting traditional forms of top-down information and find new ways of getting information. And peer-to-peer is a great way. Like the three of us here, again, the example being we all have different backgrounds, different frames of reference, and so we can intercommunicate and develop our own ideas rather than trusting CNN or some autocratic form of information dictatorship telling us to just keep doing everything as we are.
Mm-hmm.
I want to just step back just a few frames here, and just something you brought up before, Kai, and just like if you could explain that, because you explained this to me, and I think it could be very useful for people to hear. You mentioned the fractional reserve system. Mm-hmm. Could you just explain for everybody listening, like in its simplest form, kind of how that works and operates?
It's loan sharking by the banking system against the people of the citizens of their country. The fractional reserve system was an invention by very, very rich, back in the day, very rich people who wanted to basically make free money and exploit populations. So let's use the three of us as an example, right? So let's say I'm the banker, yay for me, and I'm going to lend you, Evan, $100, and then you're going to pay me back $300 over the course of, let's say, 15 years. Under the laws of our country, we'll use Canada specifically. There is no actual fractional reserve rate in Canada. In the U.S., you have to hold 10% of any money that you loan out. So I was quite surprised when I found out that Canada's actually just removed that restriction completely. But let's use the 10% number. So I need $10. I can lend you $100. You owe me $300. So now I can actually claim that as an income that I can now lend Brandon $300, even though I've never seen that money. And that money doesn't even exist, but I can now lend you $300. And now you owe me, let's say, $1,000, then I can go lend someone else $1,000, and I can exponentiate that to the point where I'm a multi-millionaire, and all I've done is lend money that doesn't exist.
That's like a Ponzi scheme,
basically.
It's like the tower that's designed to crumble. The Ponzi scheme, which is built upon not having the money and then continually loaning it out, and then the problem is that money doesn't get paid back, which makes the next loan fall out and so forth, right? That's
what happened in 2008 in the U.S. is that like they just overextended themselves. People defaulted and the banking system collapsed. And that is our financial system as it exists right now.
I think that's important for people to understand that, like a lot of people look at wealth and they look at money and they look at resources as actually having it in hand. Like I make $1,000 or I make $10,000 and I save 10% of it. And you actually save that 10% of the actual money that you actually had in your hand. Whereas people who are in that like 1% or like way up there, a lot of the time their money isn't really real. Like it's a game. It's a game of playing numbers. And so what I think this exposes a little bit maybe for people is to realize that things aren't actually built on a reality of having that actual thing. Like it's a made up number in a lot of ways, but it's based on an equation that like basically goes, well, this is theoretically the money we should have. Like I'm theoretically a billionaire, but I can
just
behave like exactly. I can behave like a billionaire because the world plays the game that I'm a billionaire, which is basically what we're all participating in.
More or less, yeah. And back to your point, Evan, too, though, is that, like, that's the fractional reserve system as it exists. But to me, that's the potential, is that we make fictional funny money. We expand the money supply to the benefit of the banking system or these billionaires with their keyboards pretending they're super rich. That power to expand the money supply used to exist solely in the hands of government itself, but government somehow became corrupted, and the little elitist class said, like, we're going to take that power and use it for our own benefit. If with enough education and or political will, governments could reclaim that money expansion power, and we could literally, like, the universal basic income could be funded by money expansion. So everybody says, like, how do you pay for it? There are so many options to pay for it. It's a simple thing to pay for it. Back to the Canadian example, back in the 30s and 40s, the Canadian government used to actually own the money creation power. And so they would issue bonds or expand the money supply by a variety of means, and then invest that directly into hospitals, directly into infrastructure, directly into railroads, and directly into benefiting the Canadian people. It's unfortunate that we lost that, and then the good news is that it'd be relatively easy to reclaim it with the political will and the sort of the public just saying, enough of this shit. We want our inherent right to govern our money back. And it sort of loosely links to cryptocurrency and blockchain technology.
Right, because basically the whole idea of crypto is not having someone control the money that can corrupt it, essentially.
Bingo, exactly. Yeah. And that is such a revolutionary concept.
Right. Which is scary for the people who, they devise all their power from that. Let's talk about, I want to kind of take this into something. So let's go back to this universal income, right? Mm-hmm. Putting it aside, because I'm sure a lot of people have their, like, oh, that'd be awesome. And there's a lot of people like, how the hell is that possible? Well, first of all,
you're a communist.
Yeah. You might not know that it's possible because you don't necessarily have an education around how the money system and economics actually works. So first of all, like, you need to educate yourself on that before you just like say that idea wouldn't work. But let's go to the psychology argument, which is that if people had universal income, there's a belief out there that they would just be lazy. They wouldn't do anything. The devil with the idle hands, essentially, they'll cause themselves trouble. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, like, so if I had $1,000 a month, would I just sit on the couch smoking weed and doing bong hits and chugging beers, right? Like, maybe, but it might get boring after a while. No, well, it's a valid argument, but the rebuttal is, who cares? If people want to sit on the couch doing bong hits with their $1,000 a month, that's their inherent right. Who are you to judge? Is everybody going to do that? Of course not. There's a lot of people. This has been studied. And so you'll get a mix of all of it. You will get the people sitting on the couch, doing nothing, and you'll get people who can express themselves creatively. They no longer need to work 80 hours a week just to make ends meet. They can work 30 hours a week at a job that contributes to society and actually develop interests and or contribute to community or raise their kids better or a variety of things. And that notion that we need to judge how people will spend their time with that money. We don't judge the billionaires for their, well, actually I do. We can judge the billionaires for their golden fucking toilets and their $1 trillion yachts. Like, fuck you guys. But if I want to sit on the couch, so what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, you're not going to, I think that the people who use labor, right, mm-hmm. They feel they're going to lose that, right? So like businesses or basically people that benefit off the back of other people, they're scared to lose that, right? And I mean, it is interesting to know, like, well, there would be consequences with their labor industry, which is like industries, but at the same time, I mean, what could come out of that might be a lot better. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, and who says that we need to be breaking our backs to build what, Yeah.
I have a couple thoughts on that. And those are very valid points, very interesting points. One, they want obedient servants. They want us to be beholden to them, need to make money, to pay mortgages, and just keep financing their golden toilets. I think we can question that legitimately and not believe the mythologies they're creating to keep us as obedient servants. Then technology, like we're heading into an era where we will be underemployed regardless. We will, the advent of artificial intelligence, the mechanization of things, this isn't an issue. We're going to need ways to deal with people not having adequate employment, because we'll have machines doing ideally half of the shit work on the planet. And so there's a huge opportunity here to actually shift human civilization to benefit the majority of us as opposed to the tiny, tiny, tiny fractional minority.
Well, I mean, I support the universal basic income in the sense that, like, as an artist, I feel like having that time to think and to be with yourself and to just to have a bit of a walkabout in life, without having something to do or some pressure on you is part of what creates, creative genius and actually opens up kind of the soul of a person. And so I think that that would be a huge benefit in that. And I mean, maybe you don't just go from like 0 to 60 in like a second, but maybe there's a way in which we can begin to like integrate this into our society and figure out, how to actually let people live.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good point. Like, what's the bridge? So if someone gets $1,000 a month, that's $12,000 a year. That's not enough to live on. Like, that's enough to survive on, if necessary, literally be a starving artist. You could get by on that if you had to, but most people will want to make their 60 or 80 grand or 150 grand a year, and they will go out and they will be motivated to do something with it. This will just help make things easier. It'll help them look after their families and themselves better. So it's not that huge a leap in my mind. And even just to take it a step further, like, we've got 7 billion people on the planet. Let's say every third world adult citizen gets $100 a month. That would be about 10% of the U.S. military budget, and it would harbor in an era of prosperity and world peace that is unforeseen. So to me, that's a potential end goal. That's not an intermediary step, but like, there's just so much potential in evolving our human condition. And to me, this pandemic, in a way, is almost a gift to question all of what has been done and is happening right now.
Yeah. Man, there's just there's so many directions that we can go with this conversation at this point in time. And I'd had a thought and I lost it, which is like my token move. Kai, part of you mentioned, sort of like you're a sort of a pioneer and as well of sort of consciousness and the human experience. I know that's something that you've you've invested a lot of your time and your life into. So obviously, I'm interested in seeing sort of the connection of sort of like your educational background plus what those experiences are, like how your sort of economics meet your, exploration of consciousness.
Yeah. Well, psychedelics. Yes, I've experimented with psychedelics, and it has definitely opened me up to what I would call more of a multi-dimensional experience as opposed to earth plane, 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional consciousness. And it's an enriching process. It's, I'm not quite sure where to go with it either, because that's a rather large subject matter.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the microdosing. I've become quite a user and advocator of microdosing, specifically with what I call it's referred to as the stacking formula, where you take one part psilocybin, 1 part lion's mane, and then you put a sort of a daily dose of niacin in there, which the niacin expands your capillaries, makes them bigger, and like literally in your brain and your entire body, so that these medicinal compounds can penetrate more fully into your system. And it's been a fascinating experience. I've been doing it for 3 months, and my ex-wife suggested that I actually do eye charts and all kinds of kind of mechanical testing. My eyesight has improved in the last 3 months.
Wow. Interesting.
At the age of 50, my eyesight has improved from taking microdosing. My brain, and this is anecdotal, is definitely higher functioning. My awareness has expanded. and I'm just generally in a better mood, and I feel just more productive, more creative, more at ease, more at peace, more communicative, more supportive. All of these really, wonderful spin-offs. Yeah.
Well, for me personally, psychedelics have been an important part of my personal journey in life. They've been something that has, for me personally, I found allowed me to transition and open up through some periods of my life that I think have made my life profoundly better. But I also think that it's in your own time. It's maybe when you're ready to explore that. I mean, what are your thoughts for somebody who's maybe curious about that type of thing, who is just listening and going, wow, that's very interesting. I'd love to be happier and improve my eyesight and whatever. What's your, I don't know, what's your advice? What's your thoughts on that?
That's what I love about microdosing, is it's such an easy intermediate step. You don't have to, blow your mind open or have a massive heroic journey through some psychedelic realm or delve into your darkest sort of recesses. You can just very gently feel better. So microdosing is the ticket. It's the easy way to just kind of integrate into a higher state of well-being, and it's readily available. It's cheap. Mm-hmm.
Cool. And oh man, I need to get more of my coffee down this morning. No, I mean, microdosing is something that has been I've been hearing lots and lots and lots of people talk about this. It's becoming something more in the forefront and more commonly accepted, something that used to be a really big taboo. I can't imagine this conversation happening, even 10 years ago, really. Mm-hmm. But now we're looking at a situation where, if you're a computer programmer, for, a major player right now, you're considered to be at a major disadvantage if you are not microdosing. Where do you see that going? Because to me, microdosing has, and I've experimented with it as well. To me, there is tremendous implications, especially for creatives out there in looking at this sort of practice.
Mm-hmm. I'll just throw out a few terms and anecdotes I've heard. Our brain is our greatest untapped resource. It is a muscle. We access generally less than 10% of it. Wow, what an incredible potentiality, right? We can actually explore our minds and become a much higher consciousness being through mental exploration and some very subtle, soft, easy, gentle tools to help us in that. And I have a couple of family members who live south of the border who are involved in the tech world in San Francisco. And you're right. If you're not microdosing, what's wrong with you? Everybody is finding it an incredibly creative, effective tool that's doing it. And it's kind of become a subculture unto itself. And this might be a relevant point too. Microdosing can mean a variety of things, including microdosing with LSD, microdosing with psilocybin, microdosing with other substances as well. And just to be clear, in my experience, the most effective direct path to really healthful microdosing is that combination I mentioned before, which is psilocybin, lion's mane, and niacin. It's the people who are kind of developing and doing some research around that formulation are saying that it by far and away is the most effective for well-being. LSD might be a slightly more creative tool, but if you just are looking for physical and mental wellness, that's by far the best combination to date. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do want to just take a quick moment, just to say that my personal thoughts are, I am not, and I don't know if anyone here is necessarily saying go out and do this, but that this
Consult is your medical professional.
Yeah.
I think I think there's a lot of fear that was created around this type of thing, psychedelics and whatnot, that people have carried with them over the decades, because really like, it was scary for like, to go back to like original points, you start to lose control of people when you can't get them to be obedient. And psychedelics in some way actually make you question your obediency, question things like, it just make you think outside the box a little bit. And so if you go back to the history of where psychedelics got suppressed, particularly in America, which kind of spread across the world, there's a lot of misinformation spread, and people have a lingering fear that's kind of like, well, if I do that, there's something wrong with me, or I'll fry my brain or something like this, right? But I would say personally that whatever you do, and whether you do a psychedelic or whether you do a piece of art, do it with intention. Don't do it just to like get high and go off and like, or maybe that's a good intention.
That could be fun too.
That could be your intention, but do it with intention. Yeah. There was an interesting moment in this show called Ozark, which is on Netflix. And there's this moment where one of the characters looks at a piece of art and says, that has no intention. And it was such a poignant moment for me, because it was like, yeah, like when a piece of art has no intention, it's just kind of like thrown together almost. It's like it lacks something. It's just like there is a voice inside of everybody, I think. And whatever experience you have an intention, and you need to, well, I don't know, need is the right word, but like getting in touch with that brings out something inside of you, which I think is kind of the point, even if it's just to bring out your joy, just to go, I'm doing this to get connected with my joy, right? But there's some intention.
Yeah. And to me, how I'm interpreting what you're saying is authentic, like that word back from the beginning, authenticity and self-awareness. Like, these are tools to discover and explore ourselves. And so whether that be microdosing or art or going for a walk on the beach or hanging out with friends, it's just one of those things we can do to expand our self-awareness and our state of consciousness, for lack of a better expression. Yeah.
I want to bring some, because it's interesting that you bring that this word intention has entered into the conversation, because, like I believe that there can be something artful, that you can bring art into anything that human beings do. And so I kind of want to bring this back to like, there is an art to economics, right? And with this word intention, Brandon, that you brought up, I'm seeing an interesting connection in this. Is that like, in many ways, sort of like we're looking at some of the failings of the economic systems that you've pointed out. And we can see the intention of these economic systems, that, where their intention lies, right? And the effects that those intentions have, we can see that they do have an intention, but in many ways they're also very devoid of intention, or at least they're very devoid of like reverence, perhaps.
Well, I mean, I don't want to cut you off, Kai, but I'd say there's an inauthenticity that's being exposed. That's what I see. It's like there's an intention, like we have an economy and we have we have these structures to build things. Like the whole idea is the tribe. Everybody commits in the tribe. Everybody supports the tribe flourishes. But that's not exactly how it works, right? That's what we're told. Everybody participates. Everybody gets taken care of. The tribe thrives, right? But like what's actually happening is everybody's working to benefit a few people, really, who are basically just using them when they don't even need to work, just so that, and it's actually exploitive. And I think it's like a hidden agenda is more what I'm seeing, which is the inauthenticity that's being exposed. And I think, I don't know, that's just my observation of what I'm
I think you guys nailed it. That's like not to simplicity. It's not that complicated. Like, we are being exploited by a very select few people on this planet, and it's time for that power construct to shift.
And I want to ask you, what do you think that exploitation, do you think that is a product of, again, like intentional maliciousness, wanting to keep people down, or is it a product more so, do you think of just like ignorance and greed, or what do you what do you think that exploitation, what is at the root cause of that?
All of the above. I also firmly believe that these fucking fucking fuckers are doing it intentionally. I think they're just greedy, soulless pricks. Like, Donald Trump does not give a fuck about people, period. He's a narcissist. And the system as it stands seems to reward self-indulgent sociopathic narcissists because they can just manipulate and brutalize people en masse without caring at all. And that the reward systems for that kind of personality type should not exist. Those people should be relegated to dog parks and little holes in society because they're just, they're part of the problem. They really are. And I can't speak to how they ended up that screwed up, but here we are.
Why don't you tell us what you really think?
If that was vague, I will elaborate.
Do you in some way see that, like, because I'm want to try and word this in a way that's not me like leading you too much into the answer on this one, but do you see in some way like that we all contribute to that in some way?
Yeah, the master servant requires a servant. We have been obedient servants. We pay our mortgages in triplicate. We take out loans and just assume that we need to pay it back by going and making real money. When we question that paradigm, the masters will become less powerful. And get out. Like, again, America, I don't understand Americans. They don't vote. What can you expect? Your system will be autocratic, and it's become not only an autocratic form of government, it's become an outright kleptocracy, which is basically ruled by theft. Get out and vote. Get out and be involved in your civil society in some capacity. I think it was Churchill who said, "You get the leaders you deserve." I saw a great little quote that I thought was quite relevant a little while ago regarding Donald Trump, where someone actually said, maybe this is the leader we deserve because maybe we are, as a culture, a narcissistic, self-absorbed, self-congratulatory culture. Maybe we are the sick ones. Maybe he's just a reflection of that. And that's an interesting, it gets back to your point. That is a dynamic. There, to be a master, there has to be obedient servants. And maybe we need to become a little less obedient.
I think, and even in Canada, I think that there is a lot of narcissism, and that's been exposed a lot in recent years. That's been a really big, thing in social culture. We've begun to see how narcissistic we are as a culture, and Canada included in that. I think in the States more so because capitalism and the lack of social kind of systems allows narcissism to flourish more. But narcissism is actually, the more narcissistic you tend to be, that usually the more unhappy you actually are. And the happier people think you are, and the more unhappy you actually are. But that's the ironic thing about narcissism. You look happy, but you're more unhappy. And people weirdly want to chase it because they think it's happy, but it actually makes you more unhappy, ironically, because it makes you more alone and more disconnected and more basically a product of your external world as opposed to your internal world.
In need of constant validation.
Yeah.
Unlike that orange buffoon south of the border.
Well, that's an interesting tie-in, actually, if we could go into that. So like psychedelics are a very internal part of, exploration, right? And I think when my experiences, at least with psychedelics, are more compassion, more empathy, more interconnectedness, more seeing things in a interrelated way than I did before. Less narcissism in myself, less self-focus, more expansiveness. What are your thoughts on that for yourself?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is my personal journey. And I was, like most young men, I was fairly self-absorbed and maybe not a full-blown narcissist, but I definitely put my needs above others. And I also had my own, inner wounding. I needed validation externally. Specifically, I needed validation from women because of my own personal history. I had a lot of wounded women in my life who were constantly trying to invalidate me and sort of make me feel insecure for a variety of reasons. And so my own healing involved just becoming comfortable enough in myself that I didn't need external validation anymore. And in letting go of that need for external validation, you just, and developing that own sense of personal comfort, you become more authentic. There's less of a pro quo in relationships. Like, I will have you in my life because you validate me, and if you're no longer validating me, you're a bad person. Some of these weird dynamics that people play with. And coincidentally, I also think that's a spin-off benefit of the pandemic, is people are isolating quite a bit and having to deal with their shit. Mm-hmm. Oh, damn, I've got nothing to distract me. I don't have people validating me the way I'm used to. My own narcissistic tendencies are being exposed. Shit, what do I do with that? Man, you can go in two directions. You can kind of grow and germinate new ways of being, or you can just crumble.
So how have you been staying creative in all of this that's going on?
Well, I'm one of those people that, like, I literally have no work right now. So how am I staying creative? Sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I'm just sitting on the couch and just going catatonic to Netflix, which is okay. And then, but I'm just trying to really stay engaged. So I host little backyard gatherings. I'm typically an introvert. I'm typically not very social. I'm typically, like, if I engage socially, it's usually at someone else's invite. So for me, it's been an interesting personality flip, other than this obvious midlife crisis thing that I've done with my head. I'm inviting people over a lot. And even in the time of pandemic, I'm making sure my bathroom's disinfected. We're having socially distancing backyard parties. I've been doing, little projects. I've been, trying to support friends and family, really connecting with the neighbors, because all of the neighbors are certainly, sitting there with idle time, and everybody's just a bit confused, a little bit fearful, and just trying to kind of put myself out there as someone who's not really too disturbed by this, and who's actually trying to take it as an opportunity to increase self-awareness and actually manifest that in real terms, i.e. when I go to the store, I'm kind. If someone's having a bad day, I don't take it as a personal affront. I just view it as someone who's actually just struggling with the shit that's going on and feeling a bit of fear. And so for me, the creativity is just really becoming increasingly authentic and well-grounded. And however that manifests is creative enough for me. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. I've noticed that actually in my wanderings outdoors with people, there's been a lot more connection, ironically, because for some reason, I live in a building, right? Like a tower. So we share elevators and we share common spaces. The people who run the place, who manage the whole entire building, they're very community orientated, and it's actually brought out our community in an interesting way, because people are keeping a distance, but they're talking to each other, I think because they don't get to talk to people. So we're like actually kind of like interacting in really interesting ways. Also, you mentioned that you don't take offense if someone's kind of like acting a certain way. I think there's a compassion and an empathy that's developing where people recognize that people are struggling, so they don't assume it's them. Like, again, it's not narcissism. Narcissism is, they must have a problem with me because everything's about me. When you look out in the world and it's not all about you, you start to actually go, they're on a bad day, but that's not about me. Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe they're just having a bad day and I don't need to like take that on, right? Which is, I think, an interesting evolution of this time.
That's a great observation. And I've seen in my own circumstances pretty much the exact same thing as you've described. Mm-hmm.
Kai, do you have like any sort of like daily, like some things that are like some simple daily practices that people could like bring into their lives to cultivate that sort of creative sense of like discovering themselves, finding their authentic selves. Do you have any sort of practices that maybe you do that people could adopt?
Well, if I'm being honest, I usually start my day with a coffee and a tiny little bit of a chocolate microdose in my coffee, and it's a great way to start the day. I immediately just relax any kind of anxiety I might have woken up with, or apprehension, or inner body tensions. And also in that process, I definitely try to stop thinking and do something that I call body scanning. So just, okay, I've got a kind of a tension in my stomach, kind of, quiet the mind, stop thinking, drop down into the body, discover tensions. Oh boy, I'm actually a lot more tense than I thought, and just go through waves and waves and waves of relaxation. And just really try to enter what I would call a state of relaxed presence, where I'm not trying to think of anything. And I'm lucky here in that I've got a house full of plants, and so I can just kind of tap into the fact that I'm surrounded by intelligent beings, i.e. plants, and I've got a backyard. I can go and lay on the grass. I've got a beach nearby. So I feel very privileged in that, but just really tapping into stillness and physical environment, i.e. the natural world, they're my go-tos.
Yeah. Like what I'm hearing you say, especially is like, it's really just like giving yourself space, especially like right off the start of the day. Like that's something that I really try to do, and especially over these like this last month and a half or so, is that I've noticed a very big difference with how my day goes based on how I start my day when I get up. So I always try to start my day with like a bit of a meditation, read something that's really nourishing, soulfully nourishing to me. And just sitting with that for a little while before I do anything, because I've noticed that like on certain days where I've kind of gotten up and flicked on a screen or something like that, my day goes a completely different way. So what I'm kind of hearing is something I'm connecting to just on the level of just like, it's giving yourself space just to be off the top.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. He agrees.
That is confirmed. Well, I was actually listening to a talk this morning, and I woke up, I did the same thing. I listened to a nourishing kind of talk, and the speaker, who I don't know who it was who was speaking, because I wasn't actually paying attention to who was talking, but he was pointing out that like all your answers all come from within. There's like nothing really out here is what's going to give you an answer. And like, you need to ask those questions like inside yourself. And it was interesting because yesterday I had a rough morning, because I'll just share this because I think it's relevant, but I started the day off pretty well. I woke up pretty early. I felt super motivated. I'm like, I'm going to get up. I'm going to do this. I'm going to whatever. And pretty instantly I looked at a screen, looked at a text message that I had gotten, whatever. And it sent me on a spiral, and really quickly. And all of a sudden, all that motivation and drive and excitement for life just quickly like went sideways. And I just decided, like, at a certain point I was up for an hour or so, and I'm like, I'm going back to bed. And I just went back to bed, and I slept for like hours more. And I decided that this morning I was not going to do that. Cause I was like, what got me, And this morning I woke up and I listened to a talk, and the speaker was just saying like, look for those answers within. And I got up, and then I listened to that, and then I had a shower, and I went for a walk, and then, I just got myself with myself. And today has been an incredible morning. And I don't know, like, maybe you can speak to that, Kai, like somebody who is such an explorer of self.
Yeah, well, I don't know that I have a lot to add, other than like you drew a very sharp distinction. When you were in control of your own space and your own well-being, you thrived. When you kind of allowed yourself to fragment into the digital world, there were consequences. And Just an observation too, like, it's okay if you feel like shit, you just need to curl up and go to sleep for 3 hours. Maybe that was exactly what you needed yesterday.
Right.
And then experientially, you're like, well, okay, that happened. It's not necessarily how I want to be today. So I'm going to adapt and do things slightly differently. And so for me, that what you did is you were self-aware enough to realize you wanted to try something different. And so you explored and you tried something different and you experimented. And so in a way, I think in that example, you've kind of described a very healthful, relevant way of dealing with the simplicities of day-to-day living and exploring and questioning and just bouncing around. Like, there's no right answer for everybody. Back to those keywords of authenticity and simplicity, like, we have a chance to simplify right now. We have space and time. We can explore, we can experiment with self. We can decide we don't like the way we started our day and we can try doing it a different way. And the key component to me is that a lot of people do try to avoid themselves and distract themselves. And, we can talk about all kinds of things like sex addiction or any kind of low-level addiction and or being a narcissist who needs constant external validation. To break all of those layers away and just really delve into your authentic self and actually gain an appreciation for yourself, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I have feelings that I'm not really proud of or happy with, and yet I accept them now, whereas I used to resist and or try to pretend they didn't exist. And there's a richness to being able to explore yourself without a lot of filters. And in this time of pandemic, ideally, a lot of us are doing some of this sort of more interpersonal work and developing a stronger, healthier relationship with ourselves.
Well, I think what you're bringing up is that I think this is a tremendous, point is that, it's a very fluid process. And it's about moving with what's going on as opposed to trying to fix things that are going on to a certain extent. I get a certain kind of, I get a really big kick out of it, but I also get really aggravated by this sort of what I sort of coined as like the 7 steps world that we're in right now, or it's like everybody's got seven steps to something, and it's like we're all just trying to like fix things and just solve things so we can just put them away all the time, as opposed to just living a little bit more interactively, fluidly, intimately with ourselves and our lives, how we think, how we feel, being curious about what those things are that are coming up. And instead of necessarily being judgmental and being like, oh yeah, I don't feel good today, I just want to sleep for 3 hours. And instead of waking up and just being like, I can't believe I just slept for 3 hours in the middle of the day, I'm just such a piece of shit, and just being like, okay, like, and just being curious about that, as opposed to being judgmental and just trying to find a way to just forget about it somehow.
Yeah, that's what I liked about Brandon's example. Is it's just that is such a relatable, everyday example that people are struggling with probably almost universally right now, and to be okay with it, and to question it, and to adapt and find other techniques that can be relatively simple. Start your day with a walk.
Yeah,
not attainable.
Right. Yeah, that's something that in this time I've been reminding myself of, and it's good to hear that. I mean, because yesterday there was for the most part, I was at ease with it. I'm like, this is what I did, and this is just how I needed to do my day. But there was a little bit of like, I wasted the day, But as I was on my walk this morning, I'm like, I feel really well rested and I feel at peace. And I'm like, maybe having that time to sleep was very good for me, and I kind of walked in gratitude while I recaptured that moment. Right. And I had amazing dreams yesterday. And when I woke back up, I was in I almost like it was like hitting the reset button, and I kind of had to start the day again, but start more on with an intention that I actually felt was much like I didn't go straight to the screen when I woke back up, right? Which is probably it's just learning, I guess, right? Finding your own way. I mean, this is basically what Evan and I talk about. But you kind of brought in a good point, Kai. It's just how it's like, not being judgmental of yourself for, going through that. Because that's not an uncommon thing, especially if you have a lot of time to yourself right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I could relate, and I could think of like dozens of examples the last few weeks that are very correlated to what you just described. Like just, if I'm not feeling well, it's okay. It's okay. Don't need to distract, don't need to fight, and just be at peace with it. One of my things too is I love self-hugs. I just love a nice, cozy little self-hug, and everything's okay. And it's actually just really reassuring. Works for me.
Yeah.
Nice. Is anybody here having a beer?
I am not.
You're not. Okay. Well, I'm keeping the tradition going, Evan.
I had to have coffee because I slept in a little bit today, and then it was just like, it was time to record. I'm like, I'm not drinking a beer before I.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, no judgment. Well, Kai, so when Evan and I started these conversations, we were just working on a script, and we would have a beer. And before we actually got to work on the script, we drink a craft brew, and it just spurred on a conversation, which is actually why these things ended up getting recorded, and there's a podcast. So I've been keeping the tradition going as best I can in these in these times. But I have an interesting craft beer, and I wanted to mention it because I thought you would find this funny, Kai. This is from Bridge Brewing Company, and it's called "You're So Vanilla."
That's appropriate.
It's a cream ale. I really like cream ales. It's delicious. It's a good little beer.
Yeah. No, that's funny.
I just thought you'd like the title, and I was like, I can't wait to introduce this beer. Yeah.
I could, my morning coffee with microdose was, I could put vanilla on it as well. I'm so vanilla.
All right. Well, Kai,
questions?
we have questions. Kai, we have some questions that we like to ask our guests. So you don't have to overthink it. Just kind of go with your gut on a lot of these things. So I'll start with the first one here. What's the most important book you've ever read?
The Tao of Pooh.
The Tao of Pooh. Nice. What movie has made the greatest impact on you?
Oh, God. I like Goodfellas the most just because of the incredible ability of the filmmaker. But it's kind of a violent...
It's all right. It's just like
No, I'd have to go with Goodfellas. That movie, it just hit me in all the right places, and the one scene where they're following the couple through the restaurant in real time is just, pure filmmaking genius. Just loved it and was inspired by it. So there we go.
Nice. And it's like that just makes me want to rewatch Goodfellas again. I'm like, I remember that scene. It's so good. What is a song that takes you somewhere?
Metric Sick News. If I have my headphones on, I cannot do anything but dance like a maniac.
Sorry, what was the song called?
Metric Sick News.
Okay, got it. Nice. Where do you think creativity comes from?
Oh, fuck if I know.
If you were to wager a thought.
Well, the thoughts that are coming is it's an internal process, but at the same time, we're all kind of zeitgeistly connected. So it comes from a lot of different places, all of the above.
Beautiful.
Everywhere.
Yes, exactly. It is consciousness itself. Creativity comes from consciousness itself. And how do you define consciousness? Don't know.
That's a great answer. I love that. How do you find, or where do you find inspiration?
I'm really finding a lot of inspiration in community and just authentic connection with people and expanding my comfort zone and expanding my social circle. I'm meeting people that normally I wouldn't really have much to do with. And it's kind of a fascinating self-discovery as well, because every interaction is an exploration of self in the end. So, yeah.
Wonderful. And what is one thing you would tell your childhood self?
Do less LSD.
All right, that's nice and practical. I love that. Great. Should we say some final thoughts here and call this one a day?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
Do you have any final thoughts, or do you want me to kick it off?
Who are you talking to?
You, Evan.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think that a lot of our conversation today has reminded me of, and has just sort of just strengthened in me, is that, you know, right now we are in a unique time that presents terrific opportunity for us to challenge ourselves to because we are in a forced unknown state. And as we've said many times before, the unknown space is where a lot of creation happens, is where creativity occurs, and trying to solve problems, we have to look at things we've never looked at, and we can't help but bring out something new in that process. And, you know, now is an extraordinary opportunity for us to reshape things, not only, to reshape ourselves and to reshape the world. And it's worth our time and our attention to do that. And I mean, we've got the time to do that now. So, there's big things that we have to look at together collectively. There's big problems that we have to solve, and it can all work out to the betterment of everyone. So that's my final thoughts.
Mm-hmm. I think the thing that you've helped me see, Kai, is like that, you know, obviously there's a lot of challenges going on in the world that are being exposed. And I think that there's two sides of all of us. There's a part of us that just wants to go back to bed and go to sleep and be like, wake me up when this is done, because I'm tired of it. Mm-hmm. And there's that other part of us that's like, well, I'm here with me, and I'm tired of being asleep through it, you know? And I think that although it can feel powerless as a person, you know, to feel like you could actually do anything to change the way the world is, I think just being more conscious and being more aware and being with yourself more and making that a practice of how you're being, you might just wake up from all of this and find that it is different because you've become different. And so I think, like, for me, just that little example I shared about going to sleep yesterday, waking back up, and then kind of starting again is kind of a microeconomic of my macro life, you know, of just kind of going like, yeah, like there's a way that I want to do this, you know, and I don't necessarily have to participate in, I don't know, like the way things are. I can walk my own path. And to kind of take this as an example, I think as an opportunity. I think this is really an opportunity. I think that's the thing that I'm seeing more and more, is that it's an opportunity to bring up all your shit, get it out here, take a look at it, and then decide what you're going to do and who you're going to be. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't have a lot to add. I think both of you have touched on very relevant points, and both of you have used the word opportunity, and it is an opportunity, an interpersonal self-opportunity and a collective opportunity. And to elaborate on your point, Brandon, if we all take responsibility for improving our personal wellness and present ourselves as more authentic, balanced people in the world, if enough of us do that, mathematically speaking, the world will be a more authentic, balanced place. So why not?
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for being on the show, Kai, for bringing your expertise and your fiery passion to the conversation. It's we don't always get that.
It's been my pleasure. I really appreciate the invite. It's been a lot of fun, and yeah, anytime.
Terrific. All right. Well, thanks for listening, everyone. Until next time.
Good to see you guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you got something out of this, if you feel it improved your life or your journey in any way, please take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, or share the episode.
You can also support us on Patreon, where we have tons of great bonuses. You are the ones that make the show possible and help us to thrive. Thank you for joining us.